So I'm just going to introduce Mohanish Jaju, who's just finished his MBAs here. And Mohanish is a really, really skilled tabla performer, and we've been very, very lucky having him as part of our department. And I'm very excited about this because I don't know what's going to happen in the session. It's very exciting.
Even I'm clueless.
Yeah. Neither of us know what's going to happen, but this is research in action. Yes. So basically, what we're going to do is discuss the history of the tabla using visual sources, using 18th century paintings. They're very pretty, I should say that now, and then also some photography from the 19th century. And when we discuss this together, I was showing Mohanish the images, and I'm not an expert on tabla at all. And Mohanish was seeing lots of things, and so he's going to think from the perspective of the performer what he is seeing in the visual archive. And this really has not been done before for tabla at all. So this is very, very exciting. So this is the tabla, first of all.
Maybe should I just play composition?
Please, please.
Yeah. Can't see.
If people do want to come further forward, if you want to sit on the floor as well, lots of options, whatever works.
So unlike the way you see in this image, he's sitting with like open legs like that, and there are no rings below the instrument. So that's why he's kind of holding the instrument between his legs. In a way, I won't be able to do that. I might get a cramp. So I'm going to sit in the 21st century way. Tabla is a generic term for both drums. Basically, this part is called the tabla, and this part is called as the daga. It is a bass drum, and well, in all my career life of about 10-15 years, I've never seen a drum in which the resonance can be modulated and pitch bent. And you got like different hand positions. So I'll play something. It's in the beginning.
So there's a sort of standard idea of what the tabla looks like. You can see we've got lots on the back wall there because our first year students study tabla as well. And there's a general conception of what they look like, and that you should be playing it sat on the floor, that you should have the supporting ring cushions and so on. When you start looking at older examples of it, these two are from the mid-19th century probably, you can see that you get a variety of different materials, you get a variety of different sizes, and also relative sizes between them as well, which is quite interesting. Where did it come from? So if you just think back to my paper when I was talking about the 18th century, and you think about courtly music, so sort of what we would think of as sort of salon music or chamber ensembles, in the early 18th century and before, you have a variety of different drums, but not tabla. You have drums like the pakabij, dhol and dholak as well, sort of the barrel drum. And these are played by male musicians, but also by female musicians as well, which I'm going to focus on a bit today. Then, towards the end of the 18th century, in Rajasthan at least, you start seeing drums that look like tabla, and they start popping up. This one is from around the 1780s in a small port in Honiara, very small. And then this is one that I showed you earlier, and you'll notice that here, this musician has got something which again looks similar. But where has that come from? So this is around 1790. The earliest images that we've got of something that looks like tabla comes from the mid-18th century. Further north, in kind of the Punjab hills, and there's an artist called Nainsook who's very, very famous, and he does a whole series of images. So this one's from around 1740, 45, and it's one of the earliest times that you see something that looks a bit like tablā. And one of the interesting things is that it is being played from horseback, and there were a variety of paired drums that could be used by musicians out on hunting expeditions and so on. So it's possible that the tablā kind of came out of a similar function. This is a gorgeous one, Listening in the Rain. Sorry. And then one of the key things here, and you'll see this all the way through into the 19th century, is that he's playing standing up, which is very interesting because now this just does not happen at all. Sorry, I can get some water. I'm losing my voice already.
Some
Been
wine.
a long day. Been a long day.
Until it's gone, I thought I'd just take it. So if you see this pair of drum and the one in the earlier pictures, but this pair of drum does not have these laces, which are made from animal goat cud. And also it doesn't have the black part or any kind of like a double membrane. So I was guessing that when this one is standing and playing, it is basically using his whole palm to hit on it, unlike how I played with just the fingers.
Yeah, and this kind of drum is one that is used by Sikh ensembles. And jori again just means pair, and there are lots of other sets of drums that are devised as being paired together. Now, when you look across, again, I just love this image so much. When you look across where these paired drums are being used by a standing musician, it's usually to accompany a singer or a dancer, often a dancing woman or a dancing male performer. This is called a pund troupe, and punds were kind of called jesters, and they would use sketch comedy, music, singing, and dance. You'll see, if we just go back, the ruler is there with his hookah pipe, and then one of the jesters has a long tape, like a hookah pipe as well, so he's imitating the ruler he's performing in front of. And then we have, usually there would be a male dancer, often dressed in the same costume as a female dancer, and would do the same repertoire. And so the paired drum in this period around 1740s, 1750s is seen in that context. Again, on the other side of India and Bengal, you start seeing these paired drums appearing. This is in Bengal in the mid-18th century. So again, it just sort of comes out of nowhere in the painting in the mid-18th century period. And again, here, this is an interesting image because it's musicians waiting to perform. You see the tambura is still wrapped up, so he hasn't even taken the cover off his instrument yet. And then these are two singers or dancers who will eventually stand up, and then everyone will stand up and the drummer will get going. But you'll notice the black spot that's now appeared as well, which is very interesting.
Can I say something? Sorry, because
No.
otherwise I will lose the moment. Because you mentioned as well the laces. So can you adjust the tension by moving some of the blocks?
Yes.
Or?
So these wooden pegs I used to I'll show it to you. If I loosen it, no, seriously, the pitch will lower. So when we tune, we hit up a peg, increase the tension on each side. That's why all the wooden pegs are kind of together. It's not up and down. And then we can also fine tune it by hitting on this part, micro tuning.
Wow.
So this is always in the tonic, and this is either in the fifth or the fourth, the lower.
What's the black spot?
It's called Shi'ah or Gab, and it's made from a mixture of oil, iron filings, black stone from the banks of river Narmada, which is in central India. So it is kind of ground into fine paste, and then applied layer-wise. You can see like concentric circles, and then it's dried in the sun for about 2 days.
I was asking because so you can consider it a kind of more technologically developed drum
Yes,
than
yes.
than the normal one. So it
Yes.
kind of makes sense that in time it comes later, right? I don't know. I'm just
No,
wondering.
It could be.
Yeah.
it could be. It could
Yeah.
be.
It's really it's interesting because I'll show you some more from this side of India, Bengal, where again you see this the black spot, but here we've got the tuning implements. We've even got the plaiting going round by the looks of it, which is interesting. According to oral tradition of tabla lineages, it's in the early 18th century that you start getting some of the founding figures. But then we've got the image, the visual repertoire kind of kicks in the mid 18th century. So the question is, you know, is it the oral history is a bit off chronologically, or is it that the artists pick up a couple of decades later what has been in the musical repertoire for a bit longer? Hard to say. But again, staying in Bengal, you have more images of the tabla or something like the tabla appearing, again supported around the waist in these sort of punned troops, also supporting female singers and dancers. In fact, do we want to try?
Yeah, we could try. I was like,
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know. I just kind of figured out a way to tie it to my waist.
Because it's never
Yes,
performed
well,
standing
that's
up
true.
now.
That's
So
right.
this is
Could you help me?
Do you know, is there a moment where the images
Just hold it.
stop being held around the waist, do you know? Are we coming to
No,
that?
kind of coming
Sorry.
to it.
Yeah, just hold it.
So like nowadays, you never learn it. You
Always
never learn to
sat on
play
the
it.
floor.
Hanging from your waist. Wow.
So this is very experimental.
I love it.
Probably will do this.
Are they insured?
But again,
Can you
questions
hold it
about
like
the size of the drum, right, will have come to bear when they started performing on the floor and so on.
It's a bit like rock climbing.
Yeah.
I've used so many knots in there. Sailing knots and climbing knots.
And there's been a similar. What I think is interesting about this as well is that we know from other kinds of documents that before the dancer would be singing while she danced. Now, from the late 19th century, it's split. So you would have a dancer who doesn't sing, and then a singer sat on the floor who would never dance. And it was split. But before, it
Holy
was
something.
one person.
Probably something like this.
Something.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I need help to get it up.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you untie it, but then afterwards, I think if you explain how it feels different, that would be really, really interesting. One question is about female musicians using these drums. You start seeing again in the late 18th century women using them. Here they're using a hand clapper, the kartal, but they've got the drums sort of discarded. And this is a particularly good one because you're meant to imagine the sounds of the thunder and the lightning crackling, and then the crackling of the hand clappers and so on. How did it feel playing compared to sitting on the floor?
I think when I'm standing and playing, it was tied to the waist. So when I'm sitting on the floor and playing, all of my energy is coming from the lower back, and then it's flowing back to the lower back. So there's a lot of pressure on my lower side of the waist. Also, if I don't play it properly, then I'm also adding pressure on my wings. Whereas when I'm standing, I can apply the whole weight of the torso on playing. I get some movement. So it's not that. I think it's easier to stand and play to produce sound, like a louder sound. But if I have to play something in fast speed, if I have to play some complex syllables together, then I need to be relaxed and have my arms free, not more tension on my arms. That's why probably we started sitting on the floor. I don't know. In terms of sound product. So if I want to play something loud but not that fast, maybe I'll stand. If I want to play something soft or loud but really fast, I'll have to probably sit down.
Does it make you feel you want to dance?
It does feel like I started moving. Like, I've never done it before. So I just felt like getting in the groove. If you've seen like taiko drum players, you know, they have these kind of movements and they're also involving their body in the performance. Whereas tabla players, you wouldn't see not dancing with his shoulders now. You wouldn't see that.
I'm just wondering, you know the Korean farmers dances, the big drum with two skins? And I wonder if the fact that there's two comes from a drum which had two skins but was a
So
single
this is
drum.
one theory, yeah. So
Is that
there is a theory that if we just go back to McCarthy, there's a theory, and it's almost a legend in a way, but it could be true, that someone cut the garbage in half
right?
and then turned it into two, possibly. And then other people. So James Kippen, who's a historian of tabla, has got some theories about how repertoires shifted from one drum to tabla at various stages. Again, you've got the thing is with the courts, there would be some spaces where men wouldn't be allowed in unless they were members of the royal family or the family of patrons. So then you would need to have female musicians, and so there are lots of ensembles of female musicians for those specific spaces. So you do have depictions of women, again, strapping around their waist and playing these drums, is another nice one. Now this image comes from Lucknow, and Lucknow starts becoming, Lucknow's a very big name in Hindustani classical music for various reasons, and we start seeing lots of images of, again, women playing tabla coming out of there from the 1770s. This one is very interesting. This was Antoine Louis, who was based in North India for a long time and patronized Indian music, and he was one of the white mogul types, as you can see. And this is him listening to a famous Kashmiri courtesan, who's probably the courtesan known as Kananjan. But again, in the background, we have a woman playing a tabla, and the way she's positioned the drums is quite interesting, isn't it?
Quite interesting. So I was just thinking of that. So if we consider that the tabla was created sometime in 1710, 1720, between 1710 and 1730, and this image appears in what, 1785, then it means that from the Bakawat hand positioning, it must have taken like about 40 years for this position to come up. Or there's some discrepancy. In Bakawats, the barrel drum, which is like that, the hand position, the finger positions, we're normally playing with the whole palm. So this sound is created by this finger, by striking. It's a different technique. And the left hand, we wouldn't use like a semicircle on, we won't play with the fingers, it's more open. So say you were telling about a painting where there was a description of like rumbling of the clouds and all that.
Yeah.
So there are compositions like that. Maybe I won't be able to reproduce the exact sound, but something like this. These are the open sounds. This was a different hand technique on the Bakawat. Whereas you see the woman playing with these two fingers, that's the position she's playing. She's also a tap, and she plays like this, probably. And if this position was discovered in 1785, then all the other movements would have been discovered by then, which are 4 basic syllables. Ta, na, ta, tun, te.
And you also notice that this other drum is sort of tucked within the knee of the leg, which is interesting. do it because that one's so big.
I must have been something like this. Like that.
Uh-huh.
So you can apply pressure on the slides. It's easier to apply pressure on the slides. That kind of stuff. Probably. Probably.
Yes.
I'm just guessing.
Does this mean that she has a much smaller drum than that does? So she has two smaller ones, so that the relationship between the two drums is also different, you think? Because I mean, there's no way she could fit.
Probably. I'm
It
guessing
looks
like this
much
must
smaller,
be. They should be like in D sharp,
Okay.
D, like a bit higher pitch, and that must not resonate as this much.
Yeah.
This
Wow.
one, but I'm just guessing.
Good. Yeah. That's so interesting because I don't know, maybe it goes better with the string one as well. I don't know. I'm just wondering. Okay, but
Keep wondering.
It's interesting. It's like we're improvising.
This is so interesting. I'm learning a lot from this actually. So we'll stay with Lucknow for a moment because Lucknow builds up into becoming a major music centre. Then by the time you get to the early 19th century, the rulers of Lucknow are investing themselves very heavily in music. They have huge lavish boat parties like this one, where everyone's on the boats, and on this one, they've got about 3 different musicians who are playing tabla. Some a man's doing it, some women are doing it. But in this stage, tabla is considered to be a supporting instrument. It's not meant to be a solo instrument, and it's also primarily associated with dancers. And it's in the 19th century that some people start calling these dancers and courtesans prostitutes. So it starts developing connotations of sex work, and there's a lot of literature against tabla players, which is why it's surprising that Brajbhasha Shah, who I did my PhD on, who was the last king of Lucknow and a major music connoisseur, he studied tabla, and then this image is very interesting. He's performing for one of his lovers who's dancing. He's left the patron's chair empty and has gone and joined the ranks of the lower status musicians and is at front and center playing tabla for them. So this was a very radical image. It was very controversial, and this was just one aspect of his controversy around him. What it is, of course, in the mid 19th century that you start getting photography of these musicians. This is from an album called The Beauties of Lucknow, which is studio portraits of actresses and courtesans and singers and a tabla player. And this ensemble, where you have tabla and then a sarangi, bowed lute, and then the singer/dancer, is very, very common. But again, we're just very lucky to have a photograph of a woman with the tabla scenario. This is quite a famous album. Colonial documentation of it goes back to around the turn of the century. Solvins, who was Flemish, was based in Kolkata, and he did a huge set of 250 coloured etchings of different people he encountered. A large set of musical instruments, including this one, a tabla, number 17. Of course, the British were invited to a lot of music parties. We saw one earlier. This is from 1840, and again, tabla prominent at the back, still being tied around the waist. Colonial photography picks up in the mid-century. These are from very different parts of India, but roughly the same period, and again, still being tied up. And this is an interesting one because a lot of the colonial photography is of women, of dancing girls and courtesans. And these women are called Murali, and they are sort of temple dancers in a way. And they're dedicated to the god Kandoba. And in the back, we can see, again, strapped a pair of tabla-like drums. So you start getting documentation of it appearing in different kinds of contexts, so courtly entertainment, but also temple dance as well. And then just, I'm racing through, but in the late 19th century, you start getting an explosion of print books on instruments and music practice, partly because there's a new generation of patrons, and also a new class of musician, i.e. the non-hereditary amateur musician who wants to study music practically. This is a particularly beautiful one, Samaya Shrap, from around 1874, which goes through all kinds of different drums and their manufacture. You've got a European-style military band at the top there, and then you've got a tabla player at the bottom. But then that culminates in this beautiful book from 1906, which is a manual to tabla drumming. And this is the front cover. You've got the ultimate portrait of this very majestic tabla player. And again, this is part of the drive to sort of reclaim the tabla musician in a way, because for a long time there was a stigma about these men and the women as well. We should back them in now that we've got all this documentation. But things like this is really sort of trying to dignify and elevate the status. But then you get these beautiful drawings all the way through of the different strokes.
I'm guessing the stroke is K, G-H-E.
Yeah.
You play it like this, K.
Uh-huh.
It goes a pitch bend with it.
And then the other one's
that
with
stroke should be tone, because he's playing on the edge. If he was playing it here, it would be te, which is a flat sound. But he's playing on the edge on the right corner,
Well, he's
which
quite
is
big.
tone. This sound. So which is normally used in, like, if you combine the earlier woman, she was playing this with this sound, you'll get, and then you get like, when you put a K in that, it'll become. That kind of stuff.
Ask a question.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
yes,
there
yeah,
now.
go
So
on.
yes, questions.
Do we know when the tabla started to become tonal? Can we tell from the pictures?
We could. There could be a way.
Okay.
We'll have to probably go back and check if all the pegs are in one line. If
Yeah.
they are up and down, which
Yeah.
means the tension is not everywhere same, which means it's not tuned.
Okay.
The only when the wooden pegs are all together in between. So that could be one of the ways of telling.
And is there a way of telling when the tabla had such a variety of tones? Can you tell from the position of the fingers or?
So, say for example, this finger you see, it's not completely touching the black part.
Yeah.
It's somewhere on the edge.
Yeah.
And the thumb is on in the outer circle. This is the position.
Yeah.
With this position, you can only play tone.
Okay.
That's the only sound which is possible.
I know just about kind of right-handed, left-handed. Is there a rule about which hand takes which drum? Like in the violin, for example, you'd always hold it this way. Or is it very much to do with right-handed, left-handed, like writing?
It's something to do with right hand, left hand writing. Well, there was a painting by the French.
Oh yeah.
Louis, what's it called?
Antoine.
Yeah. So you could see the man is playing with the left hand.
Right.
But then I think there was some kind of these cultural prejudices with, especially in some of the Hindu
Yes.
communities, where we do not enter the temple with the left leg, we enter with the right leg.
Yeah.
And the dominance of right over left
Yes.
could have kind of influenced the choice of tabla players whether to play with the right or the left hand. But then there's a funny story about my own guru, Pandit Kumar Bosji. So when he was learning from his father was a right-handed player. They had just one kid in the house, and my Guruji would sit as a kid in front of his father. So the only option for him was to play with the left hand. Otherwise, his father would have to change the tablas every time. And he became a left-handed player.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. But he does everything else with the right hand. But the tabla he plays with the left hand.
That's amazing. But there's no stigma associated with it. Like not us, but the generation of my parents, for example, they were
left-handed,
forced.
devil.
Like with
Yeah.
my mom had to you know, her left hand was tied behind her back because, sorry, this one. But there's no stigma associated, so nobody would ever consider you a worse player because you play.
No. As long as it sounds good, no one would be
Yeah.
bad about it. But there is some of the tabla players do have gendering of the instrument, which comes from a very it depends on societies. Most of the time, it was like a patriarchal society, you know, man doing everything and woman just supporting. So that's how tabla became like a male thing because you're improvising maximally and woman is supporting the expression. So that kind of a relation happened. But this thought is not followed in all the schools of thought called the Gharanas. My Guruji has taught me like this.
I find that really interesting because in terms of maybe Western orchestration, we would understand lower tones as like fundamental underpinning. Potentially, you could read that as masculine and sort of righteous, as opposed to higher feminine, maybe associated with woodwind, irrational, and thought. That's I find that just interesting. Anecdotally, yeah.
And no, could you just go back to that image where I was? I'm sorry.
Which one?
There was one more. There was a staircase and there was a man carrying the tabla, and there was just one man who did a sketch. Someone playing the tabla.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yep. He is. Yeah.
This one. So I just wanted to point out here how he has removed his footwear and it's kept like away from the carpet he's sitting on, like defining the space of performance. And like even we are not wearing our shoes now, so my shoes are also outside somewhere. And I'm not wearing. He's not wearing.
Yes.
So we've defined the space, which was I think major shift after the tabla players used to stand and play and walk around with the shoes. And then it became like a very cultural thing when they started sitting on the floor and defining the space, performing.
I really like that.
That's
it. That's it.
Yeah, just ask one more question. When did it become developed enough to be almost a solo instrument? I know it accompanies as well, but you know that's a solo instrument the way you played it. It's rhythm and melody as well, and counterpoint.
That's very late. It's sort of mid 20th century, isn't it?
I think it's after India got independence. Well, I think it was happening because solo tabla, if you just break down the different compositions, you know, in the solo tabla repertoire, we do play lots of compositions which have been inspired from Kathak dance, where the tabla was used as an accompanying instrument. I think the repertoire happened when, I don't know, I can't say. I've not studied that part. I don't want to say anything wrong.
No.
So, but I'm just guessing. Since about
1948?
ish, like 1940s ish, when tabla players started traveling to the Western countries,
Yeah.
they would have probably got inspired from other drummers playing solo drums, and maybe I don't know, people were start thinking about something. But there's also a huge tradition which was happening in South India, where mridangam was played as a solo instrument as well. So maybe when South Indian musicians traveled in the north, which happened early in 15th century, when I think Purandar Das was there around that time somewhere. He traveled to the north. Maybe exchanges were happening and probably it was recognized as a solo repertoire much later. But maybe the exchange was happening.
But it's similar with the sarangi as well. Sarangi was always meant to be supporting, and then in late 20th century you get some standout stars who say, no, I'm going to do this as my own thing, but it's very, very late.
Do you think that's linked into mediatization, celebrity culture, importing of
The world music
talent?
circuit kind of allowed people to step out the normal ensembles, basically, and then you could go and sort of sell yourself as a sarangi artist rather than being part of the group.
And nowadays it exists in different forms. So do you play it also with other instruments, or it's just solo now? The tabla.
No, we accompany.
Okay.
I'm working on my album where I've done like interactions of tabla with EDM, with dancehall, different genres.
Okay.
And
Cool.
so we use tabla for everything. We also use tabla for sound effect. There are Foley sounds. Like for example, imagine this is not there. Imagine like some some women are walking with still toes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
That kind of stuff.
Mm.
You know?
You do Ray?
Huh?
Ray?
Oh, well, like rainfall.
I could do like probably, I don't know, drops of water falling on a steel and a roof. You know?
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Or like the coal engine, the train. Train sound is quite famous. Many people do that. So it goes like. And then it passes on the bridge.
That's so great.
That kind of stuff. I don't know, just like.
And both men and women played?
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
Because, I don't know, it looks like it was quite a shared practice
it
for a long
is.
time.
yeah,
So I'm just wondering.
20th century it goes much more male. And it's partly because there was so much stigma against the group and the idea that you could be supporting a sex worker. And so they really tried to clean up the whole thing. I mean, you do get female tabla players, but now it's much more male dominated.
Because I mean, I think this is such an interesting picture for me. Because when I see these women, I mean, I would totally think they are employed as artists because there's nothing in this picture that we would associate to courtesans in the way Western people see courtesans, you know, very
Sensual.
provocative or sensual or particularly beautiful. I mean, they're not ugly, but you know, like I would think about these women as skilled musicians because it looks like their main virtues reside in, you know, they're not dressed glamorously. At least the two players. Maybe the singer and dancer is a little bit more.
Oh yeah, and her hairstyle is top of the fashion game for the 1870s.
But the other two, I mean, they look really. I don't want to use the word basic,
Severe.
but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's kind of like with women like this one. So again, kind of very standard troupe, and so she's got the jewelry and it's slightly more elaborate sari, but no, otherwise it's pretty simple. I mean, this is the thing. When I say courtesan, in the Indian tradition, they were primarily amazing musicians. That was the big thing. I mean, they offered other services. And but they wrote poetry, they were great singers, they were great dancers. Yeah. What did I say beyond that? I can't remember.
I mean, I have about a million questions, but
I
maybe
know,
we should
me
have a glass
too.
of wine.
Let's have
and
some
think
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Gosh.
Like I have, I don't know, so many questions about how you learn it. Like it takes you learn